They said no man could survive what he did. His body was on fire, literally burning, but he refused to stop. 6 soldiers were trapped inside a burning Bradley vehicle, and Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe ran back into the flames again and again until they were out. He never made it home, but the men he saved did. Before we start the story of a hero, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now let us begin. Chapter 1, The Soldier Who Never Quit. He wasn't born a hero, he became one the hard way. Alwyn Cashe grew up in Sanford, Florida. He wasn't the loudest, the strongest, or the kind of kid who dreamed of medals. But he had something else, a quiet stubbornness. When life hit him, he hit back. After high school, he joined the U.S. Army first as an infantryman, then as a non-commissioned officer. The Army became his second family. He served in the Gulf War, in Bosnia, and later in Iraq. Everywhere he went, soldiers said the same thing. If Cashe is with you, you'll make it back. By 2005, he was Sergeant First Class, leading men half his age. He wasn't the kind of leader who yelled. He led by doing. He'd carry the heaviest pack, eat last, and check on every soldier before sleeping. He used to say, "You take care of your men, and they'll take care of you." That was more than a phrase, it was a promise. And in October 2005, that promise was tested in fire. His unit, Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, was on patrol near Daliaya, Iraq. They rode in a Bradley fighting vehicle, a heavy armored troop carrier, rumbling down a dusty road under the evening sky. Everything was routine. Then, without warning, the world exploded. A roadside IED detonated beneath the vehicle, sending a column of fire and metal into the air. The Bradley flipped, landing in flames. Fuel leaked. Ammunition started to cook off. Inside, 6 soldiers were trapped, screaming for help. Cashe was thrown clear of the blast. His uniform was soaked in fuel, but he was still alive. He could have crawled away. He could have waited for medics. He didn't. He ran toward the burning vehicle. He climbed on top, ripped open the hatch, and the fire caught him. The flame spread up his legs, across his arms, onto his chest. He was burning alive. But he didn't stop. He reached inside, pulled one soldier out, then another and another. Each time his skin burned deeper. Each time he went back in. By the time other soldiers arrived, his uniform was gone, melted to his body. His hands were charred black, but his voice was steady. "Get my guys out. I'm fine. Get them out first." He kept going until all 6 were clear. Then, and only then, he collapsed. Chapter 2. The Fire That Wouldn't Go Out. The night air in Iraq smelled of smoke and diesel. Sirens echoed across the desert road as medics rushed toward the burning wreckage. Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe lay on the ground, skin charred, clothes gone, his body still smoking. But when the medics reached him, he waved them away. "Get the others first," he rasped. "I'll be fine." He wasn't fine. Third-degree burns covered over 70 of his body. His skin was melting, his lungs seared by the heat. Every breath was pain, but he refused morphine until he knew his men were safe. The medics loaded him last. He was barely conscious, but when they asked who to call, he muttered through broken lips, "Just tell my boys I'm proud of them." At the Balad Air Base Hospital, doctors were stunned. They had seen burn victims before, but not one like this. Cashe's vitals were weak, his pulse fading. And yet, when he regained consciousness, His first words were in T about himself. "Are my guys alive?" The nurse hesitated. "Some are stable, Sergeant. They'll make it." He nodded faintly. "Good. Then it was worth it." They tried to sedate him, but he fought it. He wanted updates on each soldier. He kept asking by name. When one medic told him, "You saved 6 lives," he whispered, "6 ain't enough." They flew him to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, then on to Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas, where his family waited. His sister, Class Alwyn Cashe White, later said she barely recognized him. His lips were gone. His hands were bandaged to the fingertips, but when he saw us, he smiled. Even then, the same question, "How are my boys?" The doctors couldn't explain it, how a man with burns that deep could stay conscious, how his will could override the agony. One of them said later, it wasn't the body keeping him alive. It was something else. He lived long enough to see most of the soldiers he saved recover. Some visited him in the hospital crying, holding his bandaged hands. They told him, "You saved us, Sergeant." He replied softly, "That's what I am supposed to do." But the fire had done its damage. Infections spread through his body. His lungs began to fail. On November 8, 2005, 3 weeks after the explosion, Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe took his final breath. He was 35 years old. His family was with him, and even then, his sister swore she heard him whisper one last time, "Take care of my boys." Chapter 3. The men he saved. They still remember the smell, burning metal, diesel, flesh, and the sound of a voice shouting through the flames, "Hold on, I'm coming." 6 men made it out of that Bradley vehicle alive, and every one of them owes his life to Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe. Private Daniel Dillon was the first to be pulled out. He said later, "I couldn't see anything. I thought I was dead. Then I felt someone grab me. His hands were on fire, but he didn't stop. Cashe pulled him clear, rolled him in the dirt, then went back, and back, and back again." Specialist Joseph Blakely recalled, "The man was literally burning. I could see his uniform melting, but all he cared about was us." Every soldier who survived that night tells the same story, that their sergeant wouldn't quit until the last man was out. And he never once screamed in pain. He just kept saying, "We were going to get through this." When they learned he'd died, none of them could speak. For days the camp was silent. They had all seen courage before, but not like that. Later, when the Army held a ceremony to honor him, the survivors stood together in uniform, bandages still fresh, faces still marked with burns. Every one of them requested to attend. Some walked with crutches. One came in a wheelchair. But they came. Private Dillon spoke softly at the podium. "You don't meet a man like Sergeant Cashe more than once in a lifetime. He didn't care about himself. He just wanted us home." Over time, they all went back to civilian life. Some left the service. Some stayed in uniform. But each one carried his memory like a medal that could never tarnish. One of them said, "Every morning when I wake up, I think I am here because he wasn't he." For years, they fought to make sure his story was not forgotten. They wrote letters, called Congress, pushed for recognition far beyond a Bronze Star. They wanted the truth told, that a man who gave everything for others deserved the Medal of Honor. It took years, paperwork, politics, and persistence, but his soldiers never stopped. Because in their minds they were still hearing his voice, "Take care of my boys." And they were doing exactly that. In 2021, their fight finally ended. President Joe Biden placed the Medal of Honor around Cashe's son's neck. The room stood in silence, not celebration reverence, because everyone in that hall knew this wasn't Ticum just about one man. It was about what humanity looks like in its purest form. Chapter 4. The Medal He Earned. Too late for years, his name lived mostly in whispers. Among soldiers, among families, among those who'd served beside him. Everyone knew what he'd done, but not everyone outside the Army did. Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe had been awarded the Silver Star, the nation's third highest combat decoration. But his brothers in arms knew that wasn't enough, not for what he'd done, not for what he'd endured. They wrote letters, collected testimonies, and filed appeals. Year after year, the requests moved slowly through military channels, stuck in bureaucracy, delayed by politics, buried under paperwork and procedure. But his soldiers never stopped. Neither did his family. His sister, Samarra Cashe White, became his voice. Every interview, every event, every veteran gathering, she stood up and told his story. My brother ran into fire 6 times. He didn't do it for glory. He did it because that's who he was. She spoke with lawmakers, generals, and journalists. Each time she carried his photo, a simple portrait of a soldier in uniform, smiling, the kind of man you might pass on the street and never guess what he'd done. It took 16 years. 16 years for the world to catch up to what everyone around him already knew. Finally, on December 16, 2021, in the East Room of the White House, President Joe Biden stood at a podium beside Cashe's family. The room was silent. Rows of soldiers, veterans, and loved ones watched as the president spoke. Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe was a soldier. He risked everything to save his brothers in arms. He is the definition of valor. Biden's voice caught for a moment. Then he turned to Cashe's son, Alwyn Jr., and placed the Medal of Honor around his neck. The audience stood, not with applause, but with reverence. His sister closed her eyes. For a moment, the years of grief, waiting, and struggle melted away. She whispered, "You finally got what you deserved, Bubba." And maybe somewhere beyond the desert, beyond the pain, Alwyn Cashe smiled. Because the medal wasn't about him. It was about what he stood for. As one of his soldiers said later, the medal didn't make him a hero. It just made sure the world knew he already was. For the men he saved, it wasn't closure, it was gratitude. For his family, it was pride, it was peace. And for the rest of us, it was a reminder that real courage doesn't fade with time, it burns forever. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Fire. In the years after his death, the story of Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe spread quietly from base to base, from barracks to classrooms, from soldiers who lived to tell it to kids who needed to hear it. It began as a story told at training camps, a sergeant who ran into a burning vehicle 6 times to save his men. But over time, it became more than a story. It became a standard. New recruits at Fort Moore still hear his name during their first week. Drill sergeants point to his photo and say, "That's courage. That is what leadership looks like." And they rewrite. Because Alwyn Cashe didn't save lives for medals or memory. He did it because that's what leaders do, they burn for others. In Sanford, Florida, his hometown, they renamed a street Sergeant First Class Alwyn C. Cashe Way. Local veterans built a small memorial, not grand or shiny, just stone and bronze, with his face carved above a line of simple words. He ran into the fire. Every year, school children leave notes at the base of that statue, crayon drawings, folded letters, some written in shaky handwriting that says, "Thank you for being brave." His story became part of the U.S. Army's official leadership curriculum, a case study in courage under fire. But what his family cherishes most is not the classroom lesson itself, the human one. His sister once said, "My brother didn't die because he was fearless. He died because he couldn't leave anyone behind." That's what sets his story apart. Not the fire, not the metal, but the love. The soldiers who survived that night still visit his grave at Arlington. They bring pebbles, patches, and notes. Some stand in silence for minutes. Others talk to him as if he is still listening. One of them said recently, "When I have a bad day, I remember him." And suddenly, nothing seems too hard. That legacy. Not headlines or parades, but lives changed quietly, years after the smoke has cleared. And maybe that what Alwyn Cashe would be wanted. Not fame, not glory, just to know his men came home. Because in the end, heroes don't choose to be remembered. They just choose to do what's right, even when it costs them everything. Epilogue. The fire that never died. The flames that took his life never really went out. They burn now in the stories we tell, in the soldiers who serve, and in the quiet belief that one man's courage can still matter. Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe didn't make it home. But because of him, 6 others did. And somewhere between duty and sacrifice, he left behind a lesson the world won to forget. Stay healthy, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. And if you have an idea for another untold story, share it in the comments. Your voice helps keep their memory alive.